Hello, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce myself. I'm a woman in my 60s. Plenty of things have happened in my 60-plus years on this earth. The thing that stands out in my mind above everything else is what happened to my daughter. To this day, if I think back to that time, it keeps me awake at night. I'll shoot up in bed if I think about it in my sleep. Life never goes according to plan. Even so, I could have never expected or prepared for what happened. I have a question for any parents who are listening. Have you ever imagined having to bury your own child? I've only thought about it once in my whole life. It was the time my daughter was involved in a horrific traffic accident. When I got that call, I felt like the weight of the universe came slamming down on me. I got to the hospital on the verge of an emotional breakdown. I remember grabbing a doctor and desperately begging, "Please save my little girl." I bawled my eyes out on the hospital floor. I swore to God I would do anything if my daughter made it out alive. My son-in-law came to me in tears at the hospital. "Mom, this is all my fault. I should have been driving. I shouldn't have let her go out alone." I asked him why would she be driving on the highway in the middle of the night? Where was she going? He answered, "I have no idea. If I had to guess, she was going to meet up with someone. But your guess is as good as mine." There are a lot of things she's been hiding. My daughter had been speeding on the highway in the middle of the night. She ended up flipping her car and was rushed to the hospital. That much was clear. What I still didn't know was where she was going at that hour. It wasn't like her to do something like that. The only person who knew the answer to that was my daughter, who wasn't able to speak for herself. She suffered severe brain damage and was in a coma. My daughter, in a coma. It felt like I was living inside a soap opera. My sweet, beautiful daughter would never wake up again. When the doctor told me my daughter was in a coma indefinitely, I didn't eat for days. Why did it have to be my daughter? I cursed God for doing this to her. I cursed the fact there wasn't more that could be done for her. Everyone around me urged me not to lose hope. They were right. I couldn't hate the world and expect anything to improve. My daughter was always a lively person. She had the strength to get through anything. I believed in my heart that she'd have the strength to open her eyes again. Ever since she was young, she could do anything she put her mind to. She was extremely clever. She could always figure out a way to solve a problem that was standing in her way. On top of that, she was so kind to everyone. She'd always call me to check in every week. My son-in-law was a good husband to her. He worked to make sure they had a good life together, but still always took care of her. Thinking about all of this just made the situation worse. She immediately lost weight, and the skin on her face pulled in tightly. She had none of the liveliness she used to have. My son-in-law was taking this especially hard. One day his wife was bopping around the house. The next day she was motionless in a hospital bed. I felt so bad for him. I said, "Ricky, go home and get some rest. If Michelle wakes up or if there's any change in her condition, the hospital will notify us." He told me, "Mom, the best place for me is here right now. If anything, you should be the one to try and clear your head a bit. Why don't you go down to the cafeteria and have something to eat? You haven't eaten in days, have you? I know all your energy is going into thinking about Michelle, but you have to think about yourself too. Please, for me, go get something to eat." He helped me out of my chair and onto the elevator down to the hospital cafeteria. I mustered the mental and physical strength to order some food. I sat down to eat for the first time in days. As I took my first few bites, I started to cry uncontrollably. I didn't think I could keep down the food I was eating. I felt like I was going to vomit. I rushed to the bathroom, but only sat on the floor and cried. I hadn't cried this much since I lost my father. I spent a few minutes in that bathroom. I wiped my tears, got up, and went back to my daughter's hospital room. As I made my way there, I saw my son-in-law passed out in a chair in the hallway in front of her room. "Ricky, I'm begging you. Please go back home and sleep in your own bed. You have work tomorrow. You need to get some rest. Wake up and make your way back home. I'll stay here. Michelle has her mother here to watch over here. You can rest easily knowing I'll be here if anything happens." Wiping away his eyes, he said, "But Mom." The doctor said Michelle's condition isn't just going to improve overnight. They said it's a marathon towards recovery, not a sprint. I'm fine staying here. You, on the other hand, should get back home and eat some real food, not hospital food. Please, get home and rest. I promise to let you know if there are any updates. He was right. I was falling apart from lack of sleep and not eating. I reluctantly said, "Okay, take care of her. I'll be back tomorrow." I sobbed as I parted with my daughter. He gave me a hug and patted me on the back as he walked me out. "Don't worry. I'll look after her," he said. He kept his promise. He looked after her every day. The days turned to months before I knew it. I felt like it was just yesterday that she was a sweet little girl learning to walk around the house. Life comes at you fast, I suppose. In the blink of an eye, that same little girl moved out and made a life of her own. I'd whispered to her, hoping she could hear it. "Wake up so we can travel around the country together. There's so much delicious food to eat." I was always talking to her just in case she could somehow hear it. I tried to talk with her and give her reasons to fight to open her eyes again. She seemed so peaceful. In my head, I imagined she was only sleeping, and if I shook her, she'd wake up. Ricky would come straight to the hospital every night after he finished work. But as time went on, he got more and more busy. He'd have to work late or have some work function he needed to go to. After a while, he barely came to visit Michelle at the hospital. I wouldn't blame him if coming here was too much for him to handle emotionally. I understand. As much as we hoped, it didn't seem like Michelle was showing any signs of improvement. I think that finally got to Ricky. I think he came to terms with the fact that being there with her won't necessarily do anything to help her recover. He wouldn't be the first person to start to move on when their loved one goes through something like this. Despite that, I'd call him once in a while. "Ricky, have you been busy lately?" He'd always say something work related, like, "Mom, sorry. I'm in a meeting right now. I'll call you back in a little while." He'd hang up the phone, but I'd never hear back from him. I was the only person who was by my daughter's side. I didn't mind being the one to watch over her. In fact, I did everything I could to try and get her to open her eyes. I was keeping a list of all the things I wanted to do with her once she woke up. As I wrote the list, I thought back on all the other things I asked of her in the past. Things like, "Now that you're married, you should think about having children right away." She would say things to me like, "Mom, it's not that simple. You have no idea what my life is like. I don't think we're ready for kids. Plus, I still want to work." I selfishly wanted her to have kids so I could play a new role in her life. I wanted her to have children more for me than for her. The saying, "you don't know what you've got until it's gone," really is so true. I still cried every night. I cried until my tears ran dry. I barely had the energy to get through life. My only reason for living became waiting for my daughter to open her eyes again. But I'm only human. All of this was so exhausting. I still had the same questions on my mind that I've had since the day of the accident. "Michelle, what were you doing? Where were you going at that time of night?" Unfortunately, the dash cam in her car didn't give me any clues to find the answers I was looking for. It was so frustrating to be in the dark about it. My daughter was always such a safe driver. I thought maybe she had too much to drink or she was tired before she got behind the wheel. I remembered that Ricky said my daughter kept secrets from him. That was constantly on my mind, too. Even so, I didn't take my daughter as the type to secretly meet with someone in the middle of the night. That might have just been my biased opinion as her mother, though. One day when I went to visit her, something felt different than usual. When I walked into her hospital room, I could tell something had changed. Her bed had one sheet untucked. I got the feeling someone had been there to see her. I asked one of the nurses about it. She said Michelle's husband and another older gentleman were here earlier. They left a little while ago. I figured Ricky had come with one of his family members to see Michelle. I was a little put off by his behavior, to be honest. He always said he was extremely busy with work, too busy to ever return my phone calls. And yet he was coming to the hospital during the week without saying anything to me. I called him after I had learned he visited Michelle. "Did you come to see Michelle today? You should have let me know you were coming by." He apologized for not letting me know he came to see her. My parents wanted to come see Michelle. It kind of came together quickly, and I figured you'd already be there, so I didn't get in touch with you. They said they'll come to visit on their own soon. Once work settles down, I'll be able to come by more often like I used to. I'm actually on my way back to the office right now. I felt like something wasn't right. Maybe it was that mother's intuition everyone always talks about. I felt like maybe he was trying to avoid me. I believed deep down in my heart that my daughter would wake up. On the other hand, my son-in-law and his family were acting like Michelle was already dead. They didn't have the same bond with her as I did. They weren't her real family like I am. Real family or not, though, she was an important person in their lives. I got a call from my son-in-law's mother one day. My son sends his apologies for not being able to talk with you. He's quite busy at the moment. He asked me to call instead. Ricky still has a full life ahead of him. Don't you think it's time he moves on? If I were you, I'd let them get divorced. They took it upon themselves to decide a divorce was the best route moving forward. Thinking about it from Ricky's point of view, I knew it was the right decision. Only God knew if or when Michelle was going to wake up again. Rather than waiting around until then, he should start to move on. Even though I knew it was the right choice, I couldn't help but being emotional over it. From that point on, I started noticing small changes in my daughter's hospital room. The nurses told me Ricky's family would come and visit. They always came when I wasn't at the hospital. It seemed like they were doing it on purpose to avoid me. I get it. They were pushing for a divorce. It would be a little awkward if we ran into each other. That wasn't all that was on my mind. I wondered what they were saying to my daughter when they came to visit her. I was curious if they were saying things to her that I wasn't aware of. I knew that what I did next was wrong. I bought a voice recorder and put it under my daughter's pillow. To be blunt, I didn't quite care about how suspicious it was to hide that voice recorder. I cared more about what Ricky's family was saying to my daughter. Some time passed, and I actually forgot that I hid the recorder. When I remembered, I went to retrieve it and see if it picked up anything. At first, it was just silence. I was just about to erase the data. That was when I heard the sound of a door opening on the recording. I turned the volume to max and held it close to my ear. It was Ricky's parents. I recognized his father's voice. He said, "I told you I didn't want to come here anymore." Then his mother spoke. "We had to come one more time to make sure. Michelle, can you hear me?" The first voice spoke again. "The doctor told you already that she can't hear you. Are you expecting her to respond? She's brain dead or something from her accident. I bet her mind was already gone long before that. She went crazy when she heard Ricky was cheating on her." His mother said, even if she wasn't right in the head, coming over and screaming about Ricky's affair was ridiculous. I can't believe her audacity. Something like this would have never happened 20 or 30 years ago. People these days have no respect. Her father spoke again. "Yeah, well, you made that much clear to hear when you chased her off our property." His mother responded well. She left me with no choice with how she was behaving. She was frantic and unstable. How dare she come to our house and throw those pictures of Ricky's affair in our face? How could we have known she'd end up like this? It's her fault, not ours. She was probably driving like a lunatic after she left our house. No wonder she got into that accident. His father said, "But you got rid of those pictures, didn't you?" "Yes, I burned the physical copies, and Ricky said he deleted the originals from Michelle's phone," his mother said confidently. His father smugly said, "Good. We wouldn't want anyone to find out about that. We have to keep pretending like we don't know anything." his mother spoke again. Of course I know that. I would never want anything to happen to my precious little boy. Things worked out in the end, didn't they? The only person who could have exposed us is lying motionless in a bed right in front of us. I turned off the recorder. I sat with my eyes closed and my head in my hands. My mind was racing a mile a minute. I wanted to confront them that very second. I wanted to grab them by the collar and punch their smug, deceitful faces. My heart felt like it was beating out of my chest. I could feel my pulse all the way up in my neck. It all started to make sense. Michelle found out about Ricky having an affair. She went to his house to confront him and his parents. They had a blowout over it, and Ricky's mother chased her out of the house. On her way home, Michelle was so emotionally distraught that she wound up in the accident that put her in a coma. I didn't think I could feel a deeper sadness, but learning the truth about Michelle put me in the darkest place I have ever been. The more I thought about it, the more furious I was with that terrible family. My precious daughter never did anything to hurt anyone in her whole life. I wept and wept, thinking about her and the way things had become. That was the single worst day of my life. I made up my mind that night. No matter what it took, I'd fight to get revenge for my daughter. I told my family everything. I met with a lawyer one of my friends recommended to me. After talking with him, I decided I was going to take Ricky and his family to court. I was going to sue them for everything I possibly could. Of course, it wouldn't take back what happened to Michelle. But I couldn't let the three of them get away with what they did to my daughter. We were all supposed to be family. How could they have done something like this? On her wedding day, I remember them saying, "We're so thrilled to finally have a daughter. We're so blessed." Thinking back to that made my blood boil. Word got to my son-in-law about me bringing him and his family to court. I got a call from him. "Mom, what's going on? What is this I hear about you trying to sue us?" I said to him, "Do you remember what I told you when you asked for permission to marry Michelle?" Ricky sounded confused. What? What does that have to do with anything?" I said, "I told you no matter what, don't break her heart. Do you remember that? Of course, supporting her and caring for her was important too. But above everything else, I begged you to never hurt her. I told you over and over. You have to remember, don't you? Don't you have a conscience? How could you betray my daughter and have an affair behind her back?" He feigned surprise. "I really have no idea what you're talking about. Why do you think I would ever cheat on Michelle?" He was playing dumb. He was running away from me, just like he had been since Michelle's accident. I can't imagine the frustration my daughter felt dealing with him. She caught him in the act and took pictures, nailing him for his secret affair. If only I had those pictures. If only Ricky didn't have those pictures destroyed. Plus, her phone was at their house. I couldn't just go over there and ask for it. I felt as though I didn't have enough evidence. I didn't feel like the recording alone was enough. The day came when I had to present all my evidence to the lawyer, including proof Ricky's family forced my daughter out and caused her to get into her accident. All I had was that recording. I couldn't get anything else that proved what they did or that he was having an affair. The lawyer was up front with me. "I'll do everything I can. But if I'm being honest, I don't think there's enough here to get the result you're looking for. Prepare yourself for a long, drawn-out case. I'll tell you no, it's going to take a lot out of you physically and emotionally. Be aware that this will take a toll on you." He told me that lately, cases like these have a low rate of success. There was a very good chance I would lose this battle, especially with the state my daughter was in. She wouldn't be able to give any testimony against him. I couldn't help but feel like I was letting my daughter down. The pain I felt in my heart still hadn't subsided even months after her accident. I laid a gentle hand on her head and quietly begged her, "Michelle, please wake up. I can't lose you. How am I supposed to live in the world without you?" I wept at her bedside, as I had done countless times before. I had no idea if she could actually hear me or not. Regardless, the expression on her face never changed. I understood how a person could completely lose their will to live. I was on the verge of being the same way. I started to mutter to myself every so often. I was becoming more and more detached as the days went on. My family was still coming to the hospital to visit. However, after a while, they weren't necessarily coming to see my daughter. They were there for me. They were checking on me because I was really on the edge of mental collapse. I stayed in that mental space for days, then months. I felt that I didn't have much more time left on earth. When out of nowhere, a miracle happened. My daughter started to move. No one could believe it. Everyone came to visit her to see for themselves. I held her and wept. I asked her, "Michelle, it's me, Mom. Do you remember me? Please, say you remember me." My daughter slowly opened her mouth. She looked up at me and faintly spoke the words, "Mom." Ew. I bawled and screamed out, "She's alive." I thanked God or whatever it was that brought her out of her long sleep. I cried even harder than the day of her accident. I'll be honest. I had nearly given up all hope that my daughter would ever open her eyes again. She was a fighter, just like how I always remembered her. She could handle anything that life put in front of her, and this was her most difficult challenge. She never gave up. She chose to live, and that's what she did. I would never wish or ask for another thing in my life. Once my daughter was stable and regained her energy, I finally asked her about her accident. I was chased out of Ricky's parents' house when I brought them the evidence of his affair. I was a mess. I shouldn't have been driving. My eyes were swollen from crying, and I wasn't focused on the road. I didn't see the curve ahead of me. The last thing I remember was desperately trying to turn the wheel. I told her everything that's happened since her accident. I showed her the recording and told her about filing charges against Ricky and his family. My daughter started to cry and said, "Mom, I never wanted you to find out." I calmed her down and assured her everything would be all right. "Michelle, listen to me. I did everything I could, but I just didn't have enough evidence to prove my case. Ricky has your phone, and he deleted all of the pictures that showed him having the affair. I have nothing else but this recording." What my daughter said next nearly made me drop to my knees. "Mom, don't worry. I have all of that evidence hidden away, just in case something like that happened." She told me she backed up everything onto her computer. She stored the pictures on a server so anyone with the login info could see them. Even if he tried to destroy the computer, it wouldn't destroy the pictures. She didn't have just pictures. She had the text exchanges between him and the girl he was seeing, voice recordings, and credit card statements proving he was cheating on her. My daughter showed me everything. I was torn while I was looking at all of it. While I was elated that we finally had the evidence we needed, it was also evidence of the emotional trauma Ricky put my daughter through. We showed all the new evidence to the lawyer. He had a totally different outlook on the case now. He said now we had the upper hand. I was so relieved. The legal battle has been long and arduous. I said I didn't want anything. That wasn't entirely true. All I wanted was for Ricky and his despicable family to get the punishment they deserved. I'd be thrown in jail if I did all the things I wanted to do to them. I wanted to find them and beat them down for everything they put us through. They made my poor daughter cry. It's only fair if I do the same thing to their son, right? An eye for an eye. I didn't expect for the court case to take this long or be this cumbersome. I'm fine with it, though, now that my daughter is alive and getting better with every day. I don't need anything else in my life. The only thing I pray for is that my family lives a happy, healthy life. I'll never forget how important family is. The road ahead of us is dark and bumpy. I hope we get the result that we're looking for in our fight with that horrible family. Evil people need to get what they deserve. They're no different. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope all of you find happiness in your lives.